All right, another audio-only podcast today. I'm hitting the road in about 3-4 hours. I'm going south or north or wherever I'm going to go, depending on the weather. It's going to be really icy and stormy back east. I'm not interested. So I might go south. I might just go to Albuquerque. I don't know right where I'm going at this moment, but I just know I'm going. So this will be my last recording here in West Phoenix, and I'm going to gamble and say ever again. I don't think I want to come back here. I don't think I want to come back to this part of the country. I'm not a huge fan of Phoenix. I ran from here at 17, 18, whenever it was, and I just really never liked the way this place has felt since my mom passed. And it wasn't just that. It was just the way the family dispersed. It was the way how ugly everything got for me, and also just how bitter and hateful I started to see this place as. It might not be true for everybody. In fact, I hope it's my truth and no one else's, because it's a really lousy way to wake up, and it's a bad way to see your world. It really is. I mean, there are pockets here that are really nice places here to live. I think that if you have a good wife or girlfriend, or you have a nice house and a good job, I think anywhere is good. And by a good job, I mean a place that you love to work, whether it's from home or in a factory, if it's a good environment, or driving, or maybe even public service, which to me is the highest form of employment. But I think that the idea for me is just to go find a place to call home, finally. Go find a place to hang my hat. I have been on the road now for just south of half a year. And I'll tell you what, it's fun on one level, but on one level, when you don't have the unlimited resources I used to have to stay wherever you wanted, the days of Airbnbs across Barcelona and Rome are on pause for a moment. But even in America, which is my favorite place to live, regardless of what's going on, this is the best country I've ever seen. And so being here and trying to figure out where here to call home. And now when you think about a beach, it's really easy to romanticize a different place than where you are. I think we all do it, especially if we're displaced and we really don't have anybody. But I do think that home is where you make it. I don't think that I would have a bad life here if I liked it here. If I didn't know what was under the hood so much in this town, I definitely feel like whenever I lived here and I had friends come into town, they noted, maybe they felt it off what I was putting out, right? But they noticed the hateful stares on the freeway. They noticed there's just something so, I don't know. So I believe that you can tell a lot about a person by the way they drive, the way they eat, the way they make eye contact or not, the way they treat weaker people, the way they treat people from whom they can learn. I think that in this place, it's really such a cold, impersonal, hot place for me. It's a good way to put it. I like the earth tones of like Cave Creek and Carefree. I like the feeling of like Atlantis and Scottsdale. I like the feeling of Cochise County and the Mexican border. It's just a cool vibe down there, cool feeling down there. But overall, the economy, the people, and I think Phoenix just burned it out for me. I burned it out for me, I reckon. Flagstaff, Prescott, the drive from Prescott to Jerome is one of the best in the world. But there's still that feeling of, for me, dread in a lot of the Southwest. And sometimes knowing the psychology of something isn't enough to fix it. sometimes knowing the root cause and sometimes getting underneath everything and reflecting that skin back, and admiring the cause of the damage and understanding that this is what it is. I'm going to erase this. I'm going to fix this. And once that's assuaged, we think, oh, okay, I understand it. I've defined it. I'm moving on. But it's not always that easy. I think sometimes as human beings, once we burn out, it's best to walk away and not look back, except for a frame of reference to not do the same thing in a better place. So that's kind of where I am right now. But at the same time, I feel a sense of gratitude. I feel a sense of being grateful for the friends I have, the places I've been able to stay, the people who support me, who find me worthy of my own cause and who find me worthy of being in their lives. It's an honor. So there's that too. And some of that's been here, some of that's been in the South. And when you are in your mid-50s, I'm 54, and you think about where you are and where you think about where you think you should be, and you compare your life to people you know or people you admire or even people you don't. It's human nature. We want to grasp by comparison. By comparison is a bad way to grasp anything, but we do it. I've said it before. When you tell your friend, hey, I'm into this new band, and they say, well, what do they sound like? They want to know. They want to approximate. They want to appropriate that new information. And we're no different. And with everything else in life, we're no different with a new place or a new girlfriend, a new boyfriend, whatever. We're no different. We are all trying to figure it out. And I don't think we ever quite fully figure it out. And that's the beauty of, in my case, of writing. When I write, the beauty of that is it's always a drive into the unknown. Even if I know it, it's still unknown. That makes no fucking sense, but you get it. That was a break for room tone. Now you have room tone. And today I want to read from March of Time and Skin, from kind of the end of chapter 2 and going into chapter 3, because it's about being on the road. And I don't want to read the whole opening where the character, in quotes, meets his crazy grandparents again and finds out that he's adopted at birth. What a fun day that was. And then a big thing breaks out in the cul-de-sac, or culture sack as it's called in my book. And then he meets his biological mom, and she's a homeless junkie with no teeth, and just a fucking horrible moment. But yet bittersweet and in a weird way beautiful. I think even when the veil lifts and the face behind it is a junkie with no teeth, you can still find beauty in that, because you can still have identification with something that's been kind of like gnawing at you. Like what is it all for? Like Loren's heart. What have I lived for on his deathbed? And I think about that too. And my answer is easy. Some torn highways, words on paper, or in this case on the screen, eyes of my dogs in the sunlight, bicycles, microphones, recording, film. And I received a call yesterday, a phone call from a good friend of mine, and I answered, and she said, dude, David Lynch died. And I had to get my mind around it, because like my dad, he smoked like a fucking chimney. And unlike my dad, he was creative, and he created stuff that the world will always have at their disposal for which to be inspired, or from which to be inspired, for which to use to escape. One of his movies, everything about him, I thought was such a beautiful light around that man. So I told her, I said, you know what? I want to be sad right now. But I said, he made it to 78. And apart from season 2 of Twin Peaks, he lived his life without compromise. And even someone as great as him stepped back and said, I'm not going to let anybody put their hands on my work ever again. But it happens to everybody. I've done it. I've had to, quote unquote, sell out for a job or a gig, and whenever you dip below your own standards to make a buck, we all have to fucking do it until we don't have to anymore. And that's either from just not having to anymore due to attrition, or you find a job that pays you well, like a fucking actor. But I won't go down that road because I've never met an animated corpse that I like. That's not my line. That's I had coffee with a famed director one time in Los Angeles, and he actually, really sweet guy, really nice guy. He blurbed my first novel, and we had a beautiful, 4-hour conversation over tons of coffee and ideas, and we talked about David Bowie and even Stephen King, even some movies that went straight to video that he was upset about, that not that he made, but it was nice to get an earful of true Hollywood. I'm not really a fan of that world. I've had to dabble in it because of what I do for a living. But at the same time, he told me a story about Can and a certain actor, and how one director called actors animated corpses. I thought that was the best thing I'd ever heard, and something so true to form. I'd like to pawn that extremely satisfying description for me off on jealousy, and maybe a little bit is owed to that, but I just don't. I think there's something inherently wrong with somebody who needs the world to love them, or that adulation of usually very, very uptight, boring, fake people. Now, that's not to say I haven't met some really amazing creators, because I have. I've met a lot of great people that I was really happy to meet and talk to, mostly to talk to about, not even about their work. I think some of the best conversations I've had with artists, and I mean people who either direct, record, create. The best conversations I've had with them have been about anything but the work. It's been about other people that inspired them, or me, or it's been about just everyday life. I think back to a story about when Bukowski met Norman Mailer, and they hung out all day, and then there was some ceremony or some like awards, whatever he got roped into going to, or maybe he didn't get roped in. Maybe he secretly liked all that bullshit. I think he did. I think he liked that open door policy. Come tell me how great I am, right? But his wife told him later that, or at the table, when Mailer was at a different table, and his wife leaned in and said, the whole time today, he never brought up the writing, and he was so impressed with that. And I guess then Bukowski looked at him and winked, and, I wonder how much that's bullshit. You know what I mean? Because there's so much bullshit in the private lives of creators. And sometimes not we, I should say, but the ones I grew up reading, before there were a bunch of fat guys in their mom's basement fact-checking everybody, you could say what you wanted. Like, I don't think that a lot of these famous writers were homeless or on drugs. I think a lot of them were just embellishing their character of them to sell shit, and it worked. Today it would not work. You get some fucking freak who finds some database somewhere and goes, no, October 14th, you were not in the breadline. You were enrolled in City College. What are you talking about? And you were wearing a suit. Your dad gave you a house. All those things that surface later, that will surface immediately if you try to cry poor or try to, it's both better and worse. So anyway, I think, not for me, I don't give a flying fuck about any of that, but I do think that it's interesting to look back on things today as the road opens up, as I load my car and my dogs, and I take off, as I look around and think, where do I go from here? I think it's good that the weather has me trapped in the Southwest. I think it's good to go somewhere for a week and just blow the money and just reset. So back to David Lynch. I told her, he'd want you to celebrate his life, if anything, and so if there was ever a man who understood the the oddity and weirdness of finality and the wonder of that and death and just such weird, such a not even weird. That's such a dumb word to describe anything he ever did. I never found anything he did as weird. I found it as refreshingly correct. You know what I mean? So I said, celebrate him. And it's sad. It's fucking heartbreaking. He's gone. In my opinion, I agreed with her when she said he was like the last one left. And I knew what she meant. Of course, we have our other directors, but there was something so pure and magnanimous about Lynch. Even his physical character, there was something so classy about him. So just classic, an American classic. This piece of history, this encased in time, but always moving within that. So if my instinct, or rather my guess, is wrong, and we do continue on after we die, I hope that if that's true, then he's somewhere having a cig and storyboarding his new idea. So after the character in this part of the book, after he leaves the cul-de-sac and heads south, so he ordered a pizza, and the pizza girl was this hot little blonde, and he's like 19, and she called him beautiful, and it spun him, inflated him, as he said, and she wanted to come by after work, so he left the door open, and she came by after work. And it starts from here and goes on to the road from here. And this, to further describe this, he traded in his Honda Civic, a little 4-speed, for a big van. And he was going to travel the country and just write in his journals. And he put a bed in the back, and he just wanted to be free. But there's a caveat here. He wasn't a hippie. He furthest thing from that. Blue collar, writer, reader, self-educated, high school dropout by submission, and also by choice, looking back on it. It was a happy accident, or an unhappy accident that was going to go that way regardless. And after a big white trash ballet, is a good way to put it, in Nevada, he's now in a hotel room, safely away from all that trash and damage. He had no idea. What was going on. And next thing you know, he's in this smoky, shitty little house with these crazy people. And he didn't belong there. It was just a really eye-opening but tragically comical part of his life, a moment in time, a hiccup, a speed bump, but it stamped him, it tattooed him, and as it should have, when you find out you're adopted at birth, after not really thinking you are, because you have no reason not to, you really get, it tattoos you. And this is after her shift, she closed the place, so it's late. The door opened, then closed and locked quietly. The bedding fluffed, and it sent shots of cold air against my back in the dark. She rubbed my shoulder. She smelled like food. I felt her hand run down my side. I heard each shoe fall to the floor casually. Her breath against my ear made me grow. I turned over and we kissed. She pulled her shirt up so our stomachs touched. I pulled her shirt off. As our tongues worked against each other, her pants came down, then the rest. It was dark and hot under there. She was on top. It was machinery moving exactly. It had never been that good. Then this banging hit from the other side of the door, a man's fist. We stopped. "I know you're in there, bitch. Open up. Open up the door. Now." I saw her shadow look at the door. "Shit. Who is it?" She whispered. "Tommy. Shit, shit, shit. Open the goddamn door or I'll fucking break it in." She put her head on my chest and sighed. "Fuck, I'm sorry." "Your boyfriend?" "Not anymore. He's a little psychotic." He was ramming the door. It started to crack. I sat up. Fast, under the bed. She was under the bed. I threw her clothes and purse under there with her and jammed one of the blankets in front of them. I turned the light on and yelled, "Who the fuck is it?" "Just open the door, asshole." I yelled back, "All right, calm down first. I have a gun." Bullshit. I latched the chain quietly. "Who are you looking for?" "Who are you looking for?" "I know she's in there, man." I told him I was alone. "Bullshit. Open the door." He rammed again. It was one hit away from a total collapse. I opened the door and looked out over the chain. There he was, a big motherfucker with a weak chin. I told him I was alone. His crazy eyes peered in, then around the room. He was convinced. He wanted in that door. Where were the police? I told him I had to get dressed. Then I caught it, the pizza box on the table. Under the bed in one motion, she swore quietly and whispered something about her eye. I threw my pants on and unlatched the chain. He plowed the door into me, knocking me against the wall. He was huge and shirtless. He looked around, ran to the bathroom, then ran out. He was at the next door, then the next. I could hear sirens. Before I could close the door, he was back in the room. He lit a smoke and pulled a can of beer from his pocket. "Mind if I lay low in here, man? You seem cool." "I really need to get up early." He sat on the bed. We heard the cops roll by. They stopped and walked around, knocked on a few doors, knocked on mine. I brushed them off through the chain. He was in the bathroom. They went to the office. Then they left slowly. The spotlight was everywhere. I watched it bounce off my journal and hit the television. It shook around the walls, then stopped. He came out and sat in the bed next to me. "Fuck, dude. I'm sorry. She was on foot. I followed her. Could have sworn this was the room." He described her to me. "Haven't seen her." He started crying. "I really loved her, dude. I guess I wasn't good enough." "No one ever is, man." I almost called him Tom. He drank down the rest of his beer. He crushed the can and held it. He sat down and patted me on the back. "You're a good guy." He got up and flushed his cigarette down the toilet. He came back in. "I really loved her, dude." He put his head in his hands and started bawling again. "I mean, she meant the world to me, dude. What the fuck am I going to do now? Dude." I didn't know what to say. So much for my good luck returning. "I would have done anything for her, dude. I would have killed for her and her kid." He sobbed horribly. "I would have married her." She stayed cool under there, didn't make a move, and she was under there, naked. But I sat next to him for the better part of an hour. It was war. He was finally on the other side of the door. I imagined him walking home, his head turned to the street, his hands in his pockets. He would be awake until he heard her voice again. I tried not to think of him. If it wouldn't have been me on the bed, it would have been somebody. It was only a matter of time. For both of them. She was smoking a cigarette next to me. "I hope he's okay," she said, like she'd really put some thought into it. I didn't respond. She said she had to get going, that her son was a real handful and her mother worked mornings. She told me she lived in the neighborhood across the street. I watched her fish for her clothes. She was dressed and she looked younger than what she had. She lit another smoke and laid a kiss across my cheek. I watched the door close and stretched out. Then I heard the screaming. I heard him yelling at her, calling her a cunt. I heard him tell her that he was coming back for me. From the corner of the curtain, I watched them out there. I wasn't afraid to fight him, but I knew he would take me because he was right. I started getting ready for it. She took off, running, and he looked to the room and stalled. He was on her heels in no time. Then they were gone. I coasted my bike out and opened the van, threw it in with the rest of my things, and got the hell out of there. I found a rest stop about 45 miles up the freeway, pulled over, and slept. The sun found a slit in the curtains and sent 2 yellow arrows directly into my forehead. I opened my eyes. My chest was heavy. I was sweating. I was lying in an oven. I unlatched the back doors and crawled out. Out there it was hot. The men were walking shirtless next to their wives and kids. It was refreshing to me, almost cold. My skin rose and fell back across my bones. My eyes were burning with sweat. I looked around the desert. I drove into Flagstaff and ordered a soda. I thought about her. I thought about her selfishness. That big flank of meat could have killed me, and he would have. All she saw was new skin, vanity. I wondered why I hadn't told the cops that he was in the bathroom. I decided cops were worse than women. The mountains of Flagstaff were clean and cool. I parked at an overlook and waited off my fever. On the couch and back, I fell asleep with the windows opened. I woke up to see the sunset. It was brighter than usual and colder because it was a sunrise. I'd slept for nearly a day. I drove back to the same place and read the map. Albuquerque looked decent. A young and vicious college girl came into the diner and sat in a booth across from mine. She smiled. I got up and left. I stopped inside of New Mexico. The town was small and dirty. At a gas station, I found a drinking fountain that turned out a copper arc. I bought a small bottle of water and a coffee. The city took forever. I didn't like the look it had. I found a byway going south, and I drove through the southwest, the impossible mesas, the red plateaus painted far back atop a beautiful brown, deadly, lazy scheme. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. I drove on, listening to an old country station, the song taking me back to the coffee table of my childhood, to my father drinking coffee and smoking, talking to my mother before the sun came out and he had to leave to roof houses. I was 6 or 7 years old. My mother would sometimes stand behind him in her bathrobe and pop the heat blisters across his back. I remembered his tattoos. He'd done time. The ink was deep green. He explained to me then that it was India ink, the kind they had in prison. One on his forearm was an unfinished dagger. Another was my mother's name tattooed across his knuckles. I never thought he'd come to blows with me the way he did when I was 17, or that I'd knock him on his back at 19. But then I never thought I would be 19 and driving aimlessly across the desert. My mother in her coffin, my father completely wasted, a junkie dying away to dust on the streets of West Phoenix. I drove on for a few hours, cutting through back roads and access roads. For the sheer hell of it, I turned around and took the same roads north, going further upstate. I had no plan. I was flying in youth, totally free. A mile outside of Farmington, the van died. I jumped out and checked the oil. It was fine. I tried to start it again. It kicked over, made it a few more blocks, then started smoking. It rattled and bucked into a gas station on the outskirts. The sun was fading early. I parked on the side of the station and popped the hood. I was as much a mechanic as I was a jet pilot. An old Navajo walked out of the station eating an orange. I nodded to him and smiled. He said nothing. He stood next to me under the hood. "What is it?" His voice was angered, aggravated, and aggravating. "I don't know." "What happened?" I told him. He walked away slowly and came back with another. He got behind the wheel and cranked it. His buddies stayed under the hood. I walked inside the station and bought a drink. They were standing over the engine, laughing. His buddy had one tooth in his head. I asked the first one what was wrong with it. He wiped his hands down his shirt and shook his head, smiling. "It's very bad." I stared at his friend. He nodded and smiled. I looked at his tooth. "How bad?" The other one answered. He was the boss. "Had gaskets blown. Much money." "How much money?" "We'll do it for 900. I only have 600 on me," I told him. "Nope. Fix it here or we tow it to the junkyard." I had the extra key in my wallet. "All right, fix it here." I asked him how long it would take. 1 solid day. I took my bike out and rode into town, into that place. The car lots there were useless. They either had nothing I could afford or anything I would trust. I rode back. They had the van on the lift in the garage. I found the boss again. "Listen, I really only have $600. Can't we do something here? I mean, we're both people." He scowled. "You're not my people. $900, that's a good deal. Somewhere else you'd pay twice as much." "Well, I don't have it." He looked me up and down. "Where do you live?" I shook my head. He smiled. "Maybe you can work here for the money." "Where?" He laughed. "I'll make the call. Job's hard, very hard. Maybe you'll quit." I asked him what it was. He uttered one word, digging. He told me I could sleep in the van until I paid it off, but he would charge me a little extra for rent. I thought quickly about catching a bus, but there was nowhere I wanted to go. I couldn't hitch a ride out with my bike and my things. Arizona was not an option. I told him to make the call. I slept in the van that night in the garage. It was still dark when one of the Indians banged on the door. "Get up, time for work." I had the sheet of paper with directions and set out on my bike. It was a 4-mile ride through the dusty roads and paths. I saw the sight, a long, long line of Indians on their knees with narrow shovels trenching into the ground, a truck going slowly in reverse with a giant spool of cable they laid carefully into the trench. They were shirtless and moving quickly, and the foreman screamed at them. They were an endless line ripping a tear in the desert, the line of dark red backs and elbows moving like a long machine. I was my soul after death, and I was standing at the gates of hell. I found the lead foreman and told him who I was. He yelled, "You're late." I tried to explain. He threw a shovel in my hands. 3 feet deep and 2 wide. Now. I squeezed in between 2 big Indians. The foreman ran up and nudged me with his boot. "No, you bring up the front." He walked me up to the front of the line. It was a long walk. The Navajos peered at me with my shovel, and they jeered me. At the front of the line, the foreman pushed me to the lead. I'd had it with him. I turned and held my shovel to swing at him. He jumped back and pulled out a long blade. I yelled at him, "Fuck you." The line burst into laughter. The foreman laughed with them. "Just dig, white boy. You'll quit before an hour." He put the knife back in his boot and walked away. I dropped to one knee and saw the ditch. I would work the day, then sneak out with the van before the Indians came back to the shop. I began digging. The other workers laughed. Their laughter made me angry. I dug furiously for an hour. I made sure to stay in front of them, to beat them with a widening gap. One of them yelled at me to slow down. I heard his friend. "Don't worry, he'll get tired." I thought of all the things that sickened me. I found a reservoir of hatred inside my arms. I dug on. 3 or so hours passed. It was time for everyone to drink. It was a long wait for the water ladle. There was a huge steel trough, and we all lined up to drink from that ladle. When my turn came, I took 2 or 3 gulps. Then another foreman grabbed it. "That's too much, white boy." Everybody laughed. They still had 10 minutes. They found corners of the shade by the trailer and sat. I walked back to the ditch and kept at it. They yelled at me to take a break. The foreman told them to keep quiet, that they were disgusted that a white boy was making them look so bad. I kept digging. I was yards out in front of them. They had to cut their break short. They were moving as fast as they could, but I had plenty of hatred in me. At one point, a foreman blew his whistle and we stopped. He ran over with his tape measure and stuck it in their part of the ditch. "Too damn shallow." A big worker stood up and looked at me. He ran his finger under his throat. I asked him if he was tired, and the line howled. I kept going, faster and faster, delirious from the heat. My skin was burnt. After the next hour, everybody hated me. I didn't care. I would never see them again. We worked until dusk. At the trailer where I had my bike chained, the tires were knifed, and they were watching me. I paid them no mind, picked up my bike and carried it on my shoulder up over the hill where they couldn't see. Then I set it down and collapsed. I watched the hot and dead sky turn circles over my body, and I remembered the pier in California, meeting my genius painter buddy and his younger protege who had just moved to Vegas from Arkansas, and they were in town by the pier, and we rode our bikes all day, practicing new tricks in front of the ocean. I remembered back further to jumping on a Greyhound from Phoenix to Venice Beach with $300 in my pocket the first time I'd left home. I liked it there, and I lied about my age to get my first construction job I had found in the paper while drinking coffee in front of the ocean with my first girlfriend. She was 7 years older than I was, with plenty of neurosis. Her name was Kim, and she lived by the beach there in Venice. In 6 months, she became the enemy, and I escaped her one morning while she was asleep. On the hot dirt, I thought forward from her to a beach house where I'd been a renter, living with an after-hours alcoholic and her lazy eye and her husband, who was a psychologist and latently homosexual, which occurred to me on the hot dirt was the reason he always had a pipe in his mouth. I remembered leaving there and my laundry getting stolen from the dryers in San Diego, and I remembered going to jail in Tijuana and being beaten over and over. But mostly I remembered nothing, and it was supposed to be dusk, but the sky wouldn't budge. I heard the rumbling of tires coming behind me. I picked up my bike and kept going. They blew by, yelling, hooting, flipping me the bird, leaving me in a cloud of dust. I set it down and walked it. A mile before the station, the 2 mechanics pulled up in an old car. The boss nodded at me. "We fixed your van." I stared ahead and nodded. I felt him look at his buddy and smile, then look back to me. "See you in the morning." I nodded again. They wouldn't see me in the morning. They wouldn't see me again. The van wasn't in the garage windows. I walked around back and dug the key from my wallet. I threw my bike in the side door and sat behind the wheel. I could see the last traces of sunlight crashing into the desert. Then it was dark. I turned the key. It purred. They had done a good job. I crawled in the back and laid in the couch. The van had no wheels. They had it set up on jacks. That night I slept on my stomach. I passed out right away, woke up about 5 hours later. I was stiff and sore. The flesh on my knees was raw. I didn't know when the sun would appear. I found the road and walked. Every step I took, my pants would hit the exposed skin on my knees and stick to them. I walked, thinking if this was the way it would be, then I would show them. I would show them all. I found a strong vigor within that thought. I moved on, tried like hell to ignore my body. An old truck coasted past me, then slowed at the shoulder. An old Indian with a white ponytail and a cowboy hat. He asked me if I wanted a ride. He lived right near the site. I asked him what time it was. He didn't know. He asked me what I was doing here. I told him. He shook his head. Good luck. There was a pleasant calm to his voice, deep and casual. He lit a smoke and shook one loose for me. Don't smoke. Good for you. Don't start. We drove by a billboard advertising the new Jeep Cherokee. He smiled. They totally obliterate the Indian Nation and name a fucking automobile after it. I laughed. He looked over. You got any native in you? Who knows? Just a mutt, huh? Yes. He dropped me off. So I'm going to stop here. I have to get ready and leave. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And as always, take good care.